It was just after sunrise when the dog came limping into town. His fur, once white, was soaked in blood. Not his own. People stared. Some ran. But most just froze. Because tied to his back was a girl. A little girl. Her face was pale. Her eyes half shut. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even moving. The dog, he didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stood there, like he was waiting for someone. Like he had just completed a mission. Within minutes, the area was surrounded. Police, paramedics. And then, the FBI. That's when things got even stranger. Because what looked like a horrifying mystery turned into something far, far deeper. This isn't just the story of a missing child. It's not just a rescue. This is about loyalty, about survival, and how sometimes the most unexpected soul becomes a hero. And the deeper the FBI dug, the more they realized this dog had been trying to lead them to the truth all along. This happened in a small, quiet town. The kind of place where people still wave at strangers, where the loudest noise most days is a lawnmower or a barking dog. Nothing ever really happens here. Until that morning. It was supposed to be just another peaceful day. Kids getting ready for school, parents heading to work, shops opening slowly, coffee brewing, birds chirping. Everything felt normal. And then, he appeared. That dog, covered in blood, dragging his feet, panting, tired, but walking straight toward the town center like he knew where he was going. At first, people thought maybe he was hurt. Maybe he'd been attacked by coyotes. But as he got closer, the crowd went silent. That's when they saw it. Strapped to his back with a belt and a piece of rope was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 7. Shoeless. Her clothes torn. A scrape above her eyebrow, and marks around her wrist. But what stood out the most was her complete silence. She didn't scream. She didn't even look afraid. She looked exhausted, like she had seen things no child ever should. Within minutes, people started dialing emergency services. They didn't know what was going on, but something felt wrong. Really wrong. Police arrived first, then medics. But before anyone could even touch the dog, he let out a single, low growl. Not angry, protective, as if to say, "Don't you dare hurt her." One officer, carefully and slowly, reached out. And that's when the girl opened her eyes, just barely. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just whispered something the officer would never forget. "He saved me." But the real mystery hadn't even begun yet. Because no one knew where she had come from. No one knew who she was. And no one had a clue how this dog ended up with her tied to his back. That's when the FBI got involved. And what they uncovered was something no one was prepared for. When medics finally got close enough to check on the girl, they were shocked she was even alive. She was weak, dehydrated, bruised in more places than they could count. Her wrists, raw from where she'd clearly been tied up for days. And yet, there was no fear in her eyes, only exhaustion, only trust. Not in the people around her, but in the dog who had carried her all the way here. He never left her side. Even when paramedics gently lifted her off his back, the dog took 2 steps forward and sat down, staring, not barking, not wagging, just watching, almost like he was waiting to see if she'd be okay, almost like he felt responsible. That's when someone noticed the rope. The girl had been tied to him using pieces of a torn-up sheet and a belt. Not neatly, not professionally. This wasn't done by an adult. No, this looked desperate. Messy. Like someone had tied herself to the only hope she had left. And that's exactly what had happened. The medics would later confirm. The girl wasn't unconscious when she was tied up. She had tied herself to the dog. Somehow. Some way. She knew the dog would make it out. And she wasn't going to let him go without her. But who was this dog? He had no collar. No tags. Just a microchip buried deep under his skin. And when they scanned it, they found something even stranger. The dog wasn't from this town. He wasn't even from this state. He had gone missing 6 months ago. 200 miles away. And even that wasn't the most shocking part. Because when the FBI traced where the blood trail started, and followed the path he had walked for miles, what they found at the end of that trail was something far darker than anyone expected. The moment the girl was taken to the hospital, the local police knew this wasn't something they could handle alone. There were too many questions, too many loose ends. And the fact that the dog had walked nearly 200 miles, with a half-conscious girl tied to his back, That wasn't just unusual. That was alarming. Within the hour, the FBI was on the ground. They treated the site like a crime scene. They photographed the rope, took samples of the dried blood from the dog's fur, and carefully collected everything the girl had with her. A torn bracelet, one shoe, and a piece of paper that had been stuffed in her back pocket. It had only 2 words written on it: "Help US." The girl was still unable to speak, too weak, too traumatized, but the dog? He was ready to move. He paced, whined, pulled at his leash, trying to head back the way he came. It was like he was saying, "Don't stop now. There's more." That's when one of the FBI agents made a decision that changed everything. He told his team, "Let's follow the dog." Using a combination of blood trails, paw prints, and drone footage, they began retracing the steps he had taken. It wasn't easy. The dog had crossed forests, creeks, abandoned roads, even highways. And yet, somehow, he had made it. They tracked the route for hours. Miles and miles of rough terrain. Until finally, they found something. A patch of broken ground, matted grass, and something that made the agents freeze. Small handprints in the dirt. Multiple, different sizes, some fresh, some older. This wasn't just a rescue. This wasn't just about one girl. There were more. And as the sun began to set, they saw it, tucked deep in the woods. A cabin, boarded up, silent. But what was inside would turn this story from shocking to horrifying. The FBI agents approached the cabin with caution. No lights, no sounds, just the creaking of branches, and the feeling that something wasn't right. The dog stopped in his tracks, sat down, and stared at the door. He didn't move, didn't bark, didn't need to. They had arrived. The door was jammed shut, nailed down with rusted boards from the outside, almost like whoever was inside wasn't meant to leave. The team breached it, and what they saw is something they'll never forget. The cabin was small, barely livable, but it had been used. Old mattresses covered in dirt and mold, chains bolted to the walls, and in the corner, a cage. A real cage. Inside it were broken crayons, a child's sock, a half-eaten granola bar, and scrawled across the wooden wall beside it, in messy handwriting, were the words, "Please find me." There were signs this had been going on for a long time. Multiple sets of children's clothes, school ID cards, a stuffed animal with one eye missing, and photographs. Stacks of them. Children, eyes red, faces bruised, some tied up, some asleep, all scared. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a prison, a place where innocence was stolen. Again and again, the team went silent. One agent turned away to wipe tears from his eyes. Another muttered under his breath, "What kind of monster?" But that wasn't all. In a hidden compartment under the floorboards, they found a journal, half burnt, pages torn. But what remained told the story of someone who had been here for months, maybe even a year, keeping track of the kids, their names, ages, dates of arrival, and dates they disappeared. Some had X's marked beside their names, and at the very bottom of the last page, only she made it out. The girl with the dog. That's when it hit them. The girl, the one who tied herself to the dog. She wasn't just lucky. She wasn't just brave. She was the only one who had ever escaped. And the dog? He had gone back for her. But what no one expected was that this wasn't the first time he'd been here. And it wouldn't be the last. Because when they scanned the chip in his neck, they discovered a connection to a different case. A case from 6 months ago. That had gone completely cold. A missing child. A missing dog. And a past that was finally starting to resurface. When the agents finally got back to base, they ran the microchip in the dog one more time. This time through a national database. And that's when the full picture started to come together. His name was Shadow. He had belonged to a little boy named Eli, in a small town almost 200 miles away. The same place the dog was first reported missing. The same day a child disappeared. That case had made headlines for about a week. Boy and dog vanish without a trace. No signs of struggle. No evidence. No answers. Just gone. Shadow had been Eli's best friend. They'd grown up together, inseparable since the boy was 3 years old. Wherever Eli went, Shadow followed. If Eli fell asleep in the yard, Shadow curled up beside him. If Eli cried, Shadow was the first to notice. They were soulmates, in fur and flesh. Eli's parents never gave up. Even after the case went cold, his mom still left Shadow's leash by the door, just in case. But nothing ever came. Until now. The FBI agents dug deeper, comparing DNA found in the cabin to Eli's medical files. And what they found crushed them. Eli had been in that cabin. His blood was on the mattress. His fingerprints on the window frame. His name etched into the wall. But he was no longer there. And the only trace they had left of him was Shadow. Somehow, this dog had survived. Maybe he escaped. Maybe someone let him go. But what mattered was that he didn't run away and forget. He remembered. He tracked his way through forests, through danger, through everything nature and evil could throw at him. And he found another child, another innocent life. And this time, he wasn't going to leave her behind. He let her tie herself to him. He let her rest on his back. And he carried her, mile after mile, until they reached help. He didn't save just one life. He carried the weight of every child he couldn't save before. Especially the one he lost. Especially Eli. He wasn't just a pet. He was a guardian. A witness. A survivor. And a hero. But even heroes need help. Because Shadow had brought them to the truth. But the monster who created this nightmare, he was still out there. The FBI had everything they needed to know something horrific had happened. But the biggest question still remained. Who did this? Who had built this cage in the woods? Who had stolen children and left them to disappear? And more importantly, was he still out there? The journal found beneath the cabin gave them clues. Not a name, but initials. A few receipts. Handwritten notes. Mentions of pickups, deliveries, and the word cleansing scratched out over and over again. They sent the journal to a forensic linguist. Someone who could analyze handwriting, phrasing, even spelling mistakes. The patterns pointed to someone with a military background. Disciplined. Structured. But deeply unstable. Then, they got their first real break. A partial fingerprint on one of the photos matched a known felon. Someone who had once worked in child protective services. And had been fired for boundary issues and unauthorized visits. His name was Mark Lively. He had vanished 3 years ago. Off the grid. No known address. No family. No one looking for him. But now, the FBI was looking. They dug into his history. He had worked across 3 states, had access to vulnerable families. And in some cases, had quietly been around children who later vanished. The pattern was there. No one had ever connected the dots. Until now. They issued a federal warrant, alerted state troopers, and started tracking his last known vehicle. An old, beat-up RV that had been spotted on a gas station camera. Just 2 days before Shadow showed up in town. Then came the real breakthrough. They tracked the RV to a property on the edge of an old mining town. Abandoned, quiet. No one lived there, officially. But Shadow reacted the second they showed him the footage of the area. He barked, whined, scratched the screen. He knew. That's when the FBI said, "We move now." Drones went up. SWAT teams moved in. And for the second time in just a week, Shadow was leading the way. As they approached the building, they heard something. A creak. A movement. And then, a figure burst from the back door. Long hair. Thin. Wearing a camouflage jacket. He ran. But he didn't get far. Within minutes, they had him on the ground. Hands cuffed. Face pressed into the dirt. Mark Lively. The monster was real. And now, he was finally caught. But justice isn't just about catching evil. It's about what happens after. And what happened next was something no one expected. Not even the agents. Because this story wasn't done yet. Not even close. When Mark Lively was taken into custody, he didn't speak. Not a word. No apology. No denial. Just silence. But the evidence spoke louder than anything he ever could. In his RV, they found maps. Marked with red dots. Old newspaper clippings about missing kids. And a notebook filled with names. Some crossed out. Some never even reported missing. This wasn't just one cabin. It was part of a pattern. A cycle. And somehow, a dog had broken it. Shadow had carried more than a girl. He had carried hope. The last fragile piece of evidence that finally cracked open the truth. The girl, now safe in a hospital room, finally began to speak. At first, only to Shadow. Whispers. Quiet words only he could understand. But soon, to her doctors. Then her mom. She said she remembered being taken. She remembered the cage, the cold, the hunger. But most of all, she remembered the night a dog appeared from the trees. Not growling, not barking, just there. Calm, still. And something inside her told her, this is my way out. So she tied herself to him with whatever she could find. A torn sheet, a belt, hope. And he carried her through the dark. That act, that bond, sparked something far bigger than anyone expected. Donations began pouring in. People across the country demanded justice not just for her, but for every missing child whose case had gone cold. Shadow became a symbol. His face, once just another stray, was now on news reports, murals, and classrooms. He was the dog who never gave up. And he didn't just survive. He saved someone. But there was one final moment. One that left even the FBI agent speechless. A week after the arrest, Shadow was brought to a quiet park outside the hospital. The little girl came to see him. Free, smiling now, walking on her own. As she sat beside him, another family quietly approached. A woman, a man, both with tired eyes, and a leash in their hands. It was Eli's parents. They had come, not just to thank him, but to say goodbye. Shadow looked at them. He paused, sniffed the air, then walked over, and gently rested his head on the woman's lap. And in that quiet moment, everyone felt it. Eli was gone, but a part of him had lived on through Shadow, through his loyalty, his courage, his will to protect someone else. Sometimes, heroes wear badges, sometimes, they carry guns, and sometimes, they walk on four legs, bleeding and tired, but never turning back. Shadow reminded us of something the world forgets too often, that even in the darkest, cruelest places, loyalty can survive, love can fight back, and even a dog can be a light for someone lost in the dark. Not every story ends this way. Not every missing child is found. Not every hero survives the journey. But this time, one did. A dog who had no reason to keep going. Did. A girl who had every reason to give up. Held on. And a world that almost looked away finally opened its eyes. Shadow didn't just save a life. He reminded us of what we often forget. That love doesn't need words. That loyalty has no limit. And that even in a world filled with monsters, a single act of courage can tear the darkness apart. So the next time you think you're alone, the next time life feels too heavy, remember this. There's always someone, somewhere, who will carry you if you can't carry yourself. Sometimes, they don't look like heroes. Sometimes, they just wag their tail and walk toward the light, with you on their back. This wasn't just a rescue story. This was a reminder. Kindness survives. Hope finds a way. And the strongest hearts sometimes wear fur.